I'd like to thank all the deputies who participated, and thank in particular Deputy Brian Stanley for tabling this bill. As Minister John Paul Phelan said, the government will not be opposing this bill, and indeed I absolutely believe that we need a legal framework for microgeneration, and we need to promote its expansion. It is undoubtedly a very important opportunity for people to participate in reducing their own reliance on bought-in energy, and it promotes a culture of reliance on renewable energy, which is really important. As you probably know, the EU have set an obligation on Ireland to achieve 32% renewables across all of the energy system by 2020. We will achieve that in respect of power, where we will achieve a 40% target. We won't achieve it in some of the other areas, such as transport and so on. So we will fall short in transport and we will fall short in other areas, and we need to improve in those areas. Clearly, as many deputies have indicated, we are facing a crisis here in that we are way off target in respect of the carbon commitments that we've made, and quite apart from the fact that we've made legal commitments, legally binding commitments, this is a huge responsibility for any country and any community in the approach we take. So we've had to focus in very urgently on the expansion of renewable energy, and the Renewable Energy Support Scheme is the vehicle for that. And under that, we have an ambition to go from 40% renewable to 55% renewable by 2030. And that will represent a very substantial expansion in our renewable capacity. Now, in the context of looking at that target, microgeneration was seriously examined by the department to see could it make a contribution and could it be part of the scheme. But it didn't have the capacity to be able to deliver quickly on a large scale to meet the sort of target we have in mind. It is more expensive and it would be much slower to achieve. So what was done by the department was, instead of seeking to have it part of the broad renewable support scheme, where it would be competing on all fours with large wind farms, large solar, instead a special scheme has been introduced for microgeneration, and it represents very significant subsidies for microgeneration. A solar PV gets 700 euros per kilowatt they put in. Solar plus battery is larger scale and can draw down more subsidy. A battery energy system gets 1,000 per kilowatt. So there's significant support being provided for microgeneration. And it has had, there's a very significant interest. Based on the figures we've seen to date, there's about 5,000 applicants per annum going to come in, and this is going to run till 2020. We will be reviewing the scheme early in the coming year to look at the possibility of expanding it to other technologies, or indeed to other groups of people, as indeed a number of deputies have said would be worthwhile. So this scheme, I think, can be very successful and make a significant contribution to getting people to engage in this. And I think it is a good micro business, if you like, because it can deliver up to, in some cases, it can be 100% effective where they have a battery to store. It can pay for itself in the space of about eight years, even without support. It has a good payback period. And, of course, it offers the opportunity to sell back into the grid. So I suppose we have committed that there will be, under EU, we must deliver a legal framework under which microgenerators can sell back into the grid. So I fully support that objective. It's an objective adopted by the Citizens' Assembly, by Deputy Brian Stanley in his bill, and indeed it's something that I wholly support. I suppose the issues really here are how are we going to, what is the best mechanism to deliver that. There have been different models used in different markets. Some use what they call a net market price, so when you need electricity, you buy it in. When you have surplus, you sell it in, and you just pay on the net flow. That's one way it's been done in a number of countries. Others do it by way of having a market price, like the Citizens' Assembly, you set a price, at least at the wholesale price. And I think what we need to do is tease out which is the best way to go. One of the only misgivings I'd have about Deputy Stanley's bill is that he hasn't really looked at where the costs will fall and what will be the costs and who they will fall upon. And I think, any legislation, we have to look at what they technically would call a regulatory impact assessment. But in other words, who's been asked to carry the obligation? What will it cost? Is it the least cost way of achieving it? And I think we do have to work through that through both consultation with those who will be involved and through looking at the pilot scheme to see what are the lessons that we can learn from the pilot scheme and indeed from other countries, as the Deputy has quoted, other countries that we should look at to see how do we roll this out. I think there would have to be some misgivings expressed also about the fact that you have chosen to have a minimum supply of 5% for some electricity suppliers, but not others. That 5% seems very high from what, and you're making it a legal obligation to have that much microgeneration within a very short period of time. Whether that is a realistic or deliverable target. It's not, certainly from what I've learned, and I'll admit I'm only a month in the job, it doesn't sound like microgeneration can hit that sort of a target. Like, we will deliver 15% extra renewables by 2030 through a very significant scheme which will have to have some level of support for it. I don't think microgeneration could deliver the target that you're outlining for us. So it would be potentially a very big obligation if that became law and was enforceable, and it would really be very difficult and a very high cost way of achieving what I think we all want to achieve. So there is questions that I think we need to tease out. One of the things I do really like about what you're proposing and what other speakers have talked about is the importance of getting community commitment, community partnership in many of these efforts to develop renewable energy. We will not succeed in confronting the climate challenge if we can't get community commitment. And I know some of these things will be very unpopular. I mean, we have talked in this House about the need for a trajectory for carbon price. That is, carbon is what the economists call a negative externality. We're doing damage to our environment which we are not paying for. That's why carbon price is going to have to be considered as a part of this. So it can't all be schemes of government subsidising people. There will also be difficult decisions. And as Breed Smith pointed out, we're all going to have to change our lifestyles. And that is a big change, and it's not an easy thing to do. And I think it's really important that we have a sense of community partnership. And one of the things that have been a success is the Community Initiative for Energy Efficiency. And that has been a really successful scheme supported by the SEAI. It has got a lot of community involvement. It has delivered real improvements, as the Deputy himself spoke, and indeed not only spoke about it, but visited today, because I saw him on the box, visiting Tipperary, where both improvements in schools and individual homes has been a part of a really, really good scheme. But we need, in the same way, and the Renewable Energy Support Scheme will be built into it, a community support framework. So those larger scale projects that we need to deliver the targets we've committed to will be a part of that. But we also need, as the Deputy rightly has pointed, and is the underlying principle of this bill, we need to ensure that microgeneration can be a part of that framework, that it can have a legal basis on which to enter the framework. And we will have to transpose a more detailed EU directive into Irish law. So by no means am I seeking to put off or delay or scupper legislation in this area. We are committed to delivering legislation legislation in this area, but I need to ensure that whatever legislation we bring in is the most cost-effective, the most effective in terms of community engagement, that it's effective in meeting our obligations, and it's effective in meeting the challenge of climate change. I'd like to just thank the deputies for their interest. I have taken on this post. It's not something that I had a great deal of familiarity with up to a month ago, but I do see there's a huge challenge for all of us in this House, and it isn't going to be a question of just picking the nice things that we want to do. There are difficult things in this area, and I do look forward to the support of the House, and indeed in particular the committee who's sitting now up to the end of January on this challenge. I look forward to working with the House to try and come up with proposals that we can all get in behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister.